Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Traditionalist Podcast. My guest today is the big, the beautiful Douglas SImpson.
Thank you for having me on today.
He's recently been hired at Americans for Prosperity. He's a Turning Point USA chapter, and he's a constitutionalist, grassroots political activist. Not only that, he's a big motorcycle enthusiast. So go ahead, Doug. Tell him about yourself. What's going on in the life of Doug today?
So my name is Douglas. I'm a political science student. I'm minoring in Arabic. I'm graduating within probably 3 weeks. I'll be graduating May 2018. I recently got hired at a wonderful organization, Americans for Prosperity. I'm hoping to start almost immediately after graduation. I'll be working out in Northwest Ohio. So there's a lot behind me. I've gone through a lot. I've had a lot of different almost like character developments is how I describe them. High school, I was really shy, socially awkward, didn't make a lot of strong friends. I also was very hard to the left, as a lot of teenagers were. I was the radical socialist and all that. I thought capitalism was a scourge of the earth. I thought that we had to go and take down all these different things, yada, 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 all that stuff. And in probably, I'd say from junior high to now, the difference in person, and not just personality, but just values, my goals and ambitions completely changed. Because when I originally was going in high school, I wanted to go into microbiology, but then learned that I suck at math.
Yeah.
It just kind of killed it for me. I was like, well,
I think that's like a common trait in most political science majors. That's why we're not architects or engineers. But so getting back to like you becoming a socialist, or you were being a socialist, now you're a capitalist-based individual. What do you think started that transition from when you were in high school? And we see a lot of high schoolers today who are socialists. It's very common, and it's probably more common. And it's not even like the extreme of them. Like a lot of high schoolers identify with communism and all that. What do you think started that transition from the left to the right for you?
ooh, that's going to be a big one. So it's a lot of small things over and over inching me over. So the best way to start is junior year in high school. I got involved with an organization called Wolfpack. They basically want to go and get they want to get most private donations out of elections. They want to make us that way. Elections were very strict with like who could donate, how much you could donate, and really cut back on people's freedoms, what they can do with their own property. So
The old Hillary Clinton, she didn't like that too much a couple of years ago when they tried to put a cap on political campaign donations.
It was basically trying to fight stuff like that. I got involved with that. It was it was surprising. The group actually had a lot of people. So we had I was part of the Ohio group, and I was like 17 years old, and within like 3 months I was training other new members. Mm-hmm. So I got involved with them. That really started to build up. But we had people from different sides of the aisle. So it was my first exposure to the conservatives, libertarians, and not too many libertarians in the group, but a lot more of the old school conservatives.
Well, that's kind of natural too, because when you're in high school and like college and all that, you see it every day where people just kind of stay in their own. It is an echo chamber, but not intentional all the time. So you just kind of hang out with like-minded individuals, and I think that's more prevalent now. Like as a lot of people just choose their friends off political based their political views, and you see that. I'm not saying that's what happened with you, but people don't get exposed to the other side, and that's where these like rash decisions come in, where like you think everyone on the right is a fascist, or if someone thinks everyone on the left is a communist. You see it on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah. Surprisingly, though, I actually didn't really have any friends in high school that were political.
Oh, really?
Nobody. Yeah, I just kind of came to it on my own over time. I liked history beforehand. Got involved in politics because I read a lot of history. And junior year, kind of realized like I'm that radical revolutionary socialist. We have to take down the bourgeoisie and yada, yada, yada. And they're going to destroy the planet. So it's kind of, I started out there, and it all started because I ran into the Communist Manifesto. I think it was at a library or something like that. I ran into a copy of it, took it home, and it's like, I think it's like, 60, 70 pages. Read through the whole thing in a whole day. Now I was like, I think I know everything now. And you know how teenagers are. They think they know everything at that point. You read one thing, you know the entire world, you know it's wrong. And kind of reinforced it, try to go. And surprisingly, in high school, I was not hugely involved with other like socialist groups. I wasn't involved like college. I wasn't involved like any Democratic groups or other socialist groups. I mostly just read on the topics. And on top of that, I just worked with this Wolfpack group, which overall it tried to be nonpartisan, but there was definitely a left lean.
Right.
But even then, I knew Republicans in there, but they were more the neocons.
So when you started getting involved in that group and you started getting exposure to those people, to bring it back to that, to the first time you said experiencing conservatism and libertarians and their core values, was that the first domino, do you think, in you becoming one? Or
it gave exposure. It made me think that they weren't all pure evil. At that point, I went from thinking, oh, all Republicans and conservative libertarians just hate the poor and yada yada yada, and they just want people to die. And I thought, okay, they're just ignorant. They just don't know the truth. It was kind of like a change in that, but the change really didn't happen until nothing much happened in high school after that. It wasn't until I came to college. So I did the post-secondary program, where you can go to school, you can go to college courses while in high school. I did that. My classes at high school weren't too difficult outside of math. So I was like, no, I want to challenge and I want to save money in college. So I did that program, and that got me a year ahead. So I was already a year ahead. So by the time I started full-time to university, I'm already a sophomore. So I'm taking some level classes, and in one of my classes, my World Government Politics class, I met a very interesting bunch of friends in there. And I'm still friends with a couple of them today. And they're all doing and they all ended up being different political persuasions. Yeah, my one buddy who's in the Army, he's a very staunch libertarian, very small government guy. Friend Justin, he was in the Army. He's a little younger than me. You actually know him.
Yeah.
He's fairly conservative, but he's not as political. And Gavin was just kind of, Gavin. And then my friend Nora was more of the Bernie supporter, like I was at that time. I'm still disgusted to say Bernie.
Yeah, no.
It's just like and I'll get into why later. So
I went through your Facebook earlier today, just like so we could get some more topics and stuff like that. Also, watch hitting this table because it might reverberate back.
My bad.
There. Oh, you're good. Yeah, one of your first Facebook pictures was Bernie can't be bought or something like that. Yeah, I was like, oh, classic.
Zach, I need a shot to get through this.
Yeah. So you started like seeing like the conservatives are like, okay, they're not pure evil, but like I think an interesting point you brought up is, I thought conservatives hate the poor. I thought they did this, that. So what I think this is more common on the left. I think it's guilty on the right too. I try to remain like as non-biased as possible, but people think the other side are inherently just hating of one group.
Yep.
So when I get this all the time. Oh, you're conservative. Like you don't believe in you believe in a small welfare program that you hate the poor. No, I don't hate the poor. I think there's better alternatives to get around than incentivizing welfare. We want the same goal. We don't want people to be poor. We want everyone to make livable wages. This, that, and the other. We want the same goal, and I promise we do. Like despite right wing people saying left doesn't and the left saying the right doesn't, everyone wants to see people succeed. But that's where you start getting into identity politics and the other side of the aisle, like, oh, you're right-wing, so you hate poor people. No, we just have a different way to go about it. I think the free market and work and all of that is the way, and I think that welfare incentivizes the use of more welfare, doesn't get people off of it, and the leftists disagree. They just think the opposite. They think welfare doesn't incentivize itself. They think that, being given, being given that is a good enough base and they'll work on their own. I think there needs to be incentive to work. So I think that is really interesting that you brought that up. Definitely.
That's a lot of how it is. There's no nuance. It's I'm right, you're wrong. There's no well, let's have an open discussion about it. Now I was more open to discussion because I liked having more of the deeper discussions because I hated my high school. I couldn't really talk to anybody about history, things like that. They all were like the celebrity gossip and all that. So I kind of kept myself for the most part. But going back to college. So that group of friends, I got exposed to a lot of different ideas, and we all had discussions. Another guy I was friends with. I'm gonna leave his name out just for privacy's sake, but he was also like a radical socialist too, and yada yada yada. But he wasn't as bad as he's become now. He was still more the Bernie brand, so it wasn't like one violent revolution and all that, but. He was still part of but he's still like, we need to go and tax the government. The government needs to tax the rich for just about everything they have. We need to do like worker communes and yada, 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 that kind of stuff. So it was like imagine Bernie Sanders just smoking a lot of pot and dropping acid about every 5 days. Probably about once or twice a week dropping acid, like just that kind of lunacy.
Yeah, you can't really trust like that. And I think that kind of shows that like...
Well, he didn't literally do it, I should say that. He didn't, but like his ideas and his perception was like that. It was a very muddled.
I thought you were gonna say he was legitimately.
No. He was no. As far as I know, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what he does, but like his ideas kind of came off as that harebrained. But I think a lot of it was muddled by the fact that he was a rich kid.
Oh, so
you know the stereotypical,
yeah.
Friedrich Engels. My nickname for him now is Engels because he was a rich kid who despises capitalism, even though he made his money from capitalism.
Or his parents.
Yeah. They pay for every.
Well, it's because he doesn't have. He's been gifted. He doesn't have the value of money. He doesn't have a concept of like what hard work actually brings you when you have that silver spoon. And it's not true. You see, rich people do well all the time, even though they had a privileged upbringing. If that incentive or not incentive, that value of hard work for what you have is not ingrained at an early age, it's really hard to develop later, and you can definitely see that in kids.
Oh yeah.
And especially it's even more prevalent in single kids because they're usually more sheltered and all that. I'm not saying being a single kid is bad, but it's more prevalent that if you're one child versus 3 or 4, the one child is definitely gonna receive more special treatments. That's the angel of the family. There's not I have multiple sisters and the love was kind of dispersed. We're very loved, but I didn't have all the bearing down on me.
Well, I think he has 1 or 2 siblings, but that's irrelevant. So we would talk a lot about all these different things going on, and we'd always basically question each other. We always would go and have a conversation, and this is when it started to slowly happen. Is with this group of friends. Probably about 5, 6 of us, and we'd all hang out together, especially during the semester. But after the semester ended, it was kind of hard because we didn't have the class together, so we couldn't just go and hang out for 2 hours after that. And we'd usually hang out once a week or so. We'd all get together, and we'd all have different political discussions. And of course, it would be basically me and Engels would be going against Justin and Adam, and we'd be arguing each other, and then Nora just kind of sitting there, just not sure what to say. She just never got involved with it. So it was kind of me and Engels versus Adam and Justin. We basically just have these political clashes.
So you think that actually having political discourse is what pushed you more right wing?
It definitely was. It definitely played a role.
So when these people have echo chambers, they don't hear themselves talk. They just hear the same voices reiterated and re-echoed and all that. They don't hear dissenting ideas. But when you hear yourself be wrong, I think that is when all you have is yes men and people that agree. You're never gonna change your thought process. But when the second you're okay, I see what you're saying. That open discussion is so necessary in today's politics, and it's a crime that it's not more readily the safe spaces on campus. Where Akron's not too bad with it, but in college campuses all across the United States, there's safe spaces. You and I are both aware. We're dealing with this kind of stuff all the time, where no dissenting ideas in a certain space. Oh, you don't agree with socialist policies? I don't want to hear that. Instead of being an adult,
I run up my safe space where I can go and cry into a Karl Marx magazine or something like that.
Yeah, basically. And
socialism today.
So you guys are just sitting there discussing it, and then what was your next step? Because you're one of the most politically active guys I know. So you don't just go from sitting in your friend's basement talking, shooting the shit about politics to, leading student organizations on college campuses and going to protests and all that. So, what was I'm going to get involved? What was your, this is for me, I want to do this, this is the direction I'm going? What was that for you?
So I kept having it over time. I got involved with I didn't really get too involved, very loosely with the College Democrats at my university. It was very loosely. I actually think after I went over and I became much more libertarian. I think I actually went to more of their meetings, learned more about them. I got more interested to hear what the other side says. But when I was on their side, and I was on the left, it wasn't. I didn't go too often. I actually wasn't even particularly active. I didn't really latch on to a lot of people. I'll be honest. The one thing that stuck about me. The people are so goddamn boring, and there's a lot of them that are so lazy. That's probably a big one, is the hypocrisy. A lot of them. This one guy Engels, he would always complain. Once I started getting more and more over to the right, I started leaving the left. I started being left. I started questioning him more than my other friends, because my friends they make good points. I can't really poke any holes in it, but you're starting to have a lot of holes, my friend. And I brought to him at one point, and I said, And this is one of the discussions I asked him, like, so you come from a very wealthy family, they pay for your tuition, you get all this different stuff on top of that. How do you reconcile that with the fact that your parents made their money through capitalism, whereas you want to destroy the very system that gave you wealth? Why don't you completely disown your wealth to go and keep up with, to avoid hypocrisy? Why aren't you disowning your wealth? Why aren't you saying that my wealth was illegitimately earned from the exploitation of the poor? Why are you not doing that? And his answer was, because I'm using my wealth to fight capitalism. And that's the day when I gave him the nickname Engels, because Friedrich Engels was the one that financed Marx, because Friedrich Engels ran a factory. I think it was in Manchester, England.
It was, and that's where they started getting his ideas for like the commune cities, and they tried them in America. There's like probably a good 2 dozen attempts like throughout like Western Europe and like the United States when it was kind of more of in its infancy, and none of them ever worked. There was a couple small ones, like 10 to like 30 people, that lasted like a decade or two, but other than that, they all phased out one way or another.
There is one that still technically exists, Slab City out in California. I think it's out in California. It's like middle of I don't know how much I can swear, but I'm just gonna keep it clean. It's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, like, it is as far out into the desert as can be. It's based in an abandoned military site, and it got the name Slab City because of all these concrete pillars, all these pieces of concrete and concrete chunks that are everywhere. It's basically all these hippies that just live out there, and they aren't even self-sufficient.
When did that start? The 70s?
I think like 60s, 70s or so, but people just basically squat there. It goes.
So it's more of a homeless refuge.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, no, there's like people there. Like people are. It's like here they all try to say that, oh, we're anarchists, we're so edgy and hip. Here, a good portion of them are just Social Security recipients or pensioners that just want to live cheaply.
And then they go into town, buy their stuff instead of growing and being self-sufficient.
Yeah, and so well, it's a desert. They got nothing there. They got nothing. They just got sand, and it is like the most. Like even then, like I learned about it from Vice News, and it is the most rundown, dingy, dangerous place you can be. Like they talk about all of it and shit that can just happen. It's like, yeah. I don't know if this is like a good thing. And the guy, Engels, eventually went out and identified more as an anarchist. And that's what he did. That
seems like the cop-out. Like,
yeah, I'll get more into what happened with that because that was interesting itself. But I started questioning him a lot. And eventually that started pushing me, but it was a lot of this questioning of different ideals from not just him, but other socialists I met. At the time, I was supporting Bernie Sanders. I'm still I still flagellate myself every single morning for that, voting for socialists. I'm just like, I was in the primaries, and I'm just disgusted.
So that was recent. Like that was even like,
it's been about 2 years now. Yeah, it's been a 2-year span.
That was a fast transition from.
Well, what happened is it was kind of a slow. And what happened is I kept having these questions. They wouldn't answer. It was more of a don't ask that, or that's not something we need to worry about, or it's okay if we do it because we're on the right side of history. That was the reason. The reason is emotional. It was not, well, this is why we think it is because this is what's happened historically. It's no, we are on the right side of history. If you don't agree with us, you hate the poor, you are racist, sexist, blah, 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 all their buzzwords, pretty much. If you don't agree with them, you are everything that we hate. You are pure evil, and you need to be wiped from the face of the earth.
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's how a lot of, especially like the leader, a lot of these groups. And
well, you're not lying because I mean, you and I went to a college Democrats meeting. It was based off of we were trying to start a charity for veterans, homeless veterans. We were trying to get food and supplies they needed, and we were trying to talk to the college Democrats president and their executives to be like, hey, let's partner up. No politics involved. Like we can both agree this is a good thing to get a part of. Let's do like a food drive, get some money raised, yada yada yada. They said they were down, and they never would do it after that. They just backed out. Like they do with everything, they won't debate us. They won't do food drives or anything. But we went there, and I'm a huge Indians fan. I'm not sure if you like the Indians.
I like more the minor league baseball. So.
Oh yeah, you're a Rubber Ducks fan.
Yeah, I like Rubber Ducks and that. I mean, I go to the stadium a lot, so of course.
So I'm a huge Indians fan, and the whole recent thing with like Chief Wahoo being phased out over time, they were talking about that there. This is a good, what is it, 4 months ago?
Yeah, this is probably back mid-January.
Yeah, it's a good couple months ago. And they were talking about just how absolutely racist like Chief Wahoo was, and I was like, you guys don't even know like the history of it. It was named after one of the baseball players on the Indians. He was the top player in the 20s. So they were originally called the Naps, the Cleveland Naps. and it was named after a player. I think his name was Napoli, not like the one we have today, but it's Nap or Napoli, or I can't remember. And he had a falling out with the team. They're like, all right, we gotta change the name because like screw this guy basically. And they're like, well, we had this really good player. I think it was shortly after he either passed away or he was hurt. Something happened. I'm like, let's name it after him. So they named it after him, and I think that's an honor. You know, they named it after one of their baseball players. Granted, like if that happened today, like someone started it up, that'd be like a big no-no. Like you can't do that. But the historical context of it is they had a great player. I think it was revolutionary for their time. Like there was a time when Native Americans were greatly like persecuted. They were, you know, after the Trail of Tears, they were more prevalent on reservations. They were not a good time in the history for the Native Americans, and for the Cleveland baseball team to do that, I think that just says a lot. And now people are, you know, basically taking a crap on what would have been a huge liberal moment back in the day. It's like they would have been celebrated back in the day by the same people.
The left eats itself alive.
Yeah, it's just absurd to me. Like they're literally crapping on a monument to a Native American by like, you know, and that's before black people could play baseball. It's because probably the only minority group that could play baseball was the Native Americans, and they're just taking a crap on it because they refuse to educate themselves on it. So getting back, so you're like, not just getting on that tangent.
Yeah, you're fine. You're good.
I wear my like long live the Chief shirt all the time. So you started questioning, you started poking holes in their groups, and you're still like a Bernie crat at this time.
Yeah,
so,
I was a burnout, unfortunately.
Yeah, so what goes from there? You're like, all right, these guys got problems. Like they don't know what they're talking about. Like I'm seeing them for what they really are. Like, so what do you do from there? You just like leave, like you leave their scene, or do you like slowly go out? You try to reason it with yourself. Like what goes on?
So the best way to describe it is, it was slow. I was very gradual, like a very small, tiny shift, and then out of nowhere, bam! It's like, it kind of just all dawned on me. And so I had a moment, I still remember it. So I was going into the primary season, and I'm sitting there, it's like, I don't know, it's like, I'm really having problems, but I'm just like, I don't know where I am. It's like, it's kind of that identity crisis, like when you get the primaries, and like, a lot of people I knew were, of course, voting Bernie. So I was like, well, I've been supporting up to this point. I mean, I have questions, but I mean, he's better than Hillary. At that point, I was actually abhorrent about Trump. And so I ended up voting for Bernie in the primary. And then a week later, left the Democratic Party, and I told all of them, see you later, I'm done. I can't deal with the crap. I had so many issues they would not address. There was very little open discussion, if really any at all. There was nothing more than them pressuring each other into believing the same ideas. If you don't agree with so-and-so, or if you question this person, then you're horrible, yada, yada, yada. How can you think that? I couldn't deal with it anymore. Well, almost all of it is emotional appeal. Like you have to say, like with the March for Our Lives you had, I went there with one of my buddies, and here, they all gave emotional reasons. They didn't try to look into, well, what has historically looked better? Or why, from a philosophical perspective, would we want guns or not want guns? It was all, guns are scary. Guns aren't needed. Nobody needs a gun. If we just ban guns, it'll all be better. And they don't try to use any sort of any logic behind their decisions. It's all emotion. It's about feeling good. Yeah. All they want to do is feel good. And that kind of makes me just wonder, is like, are they actually in it to do anything, or are they just kind of, blowing hot air?
I wanted to touch on two things you kind of jumped over real quick. But,
yeah, sure.
Like this past election with, like, the Bernie Sanders primary debacle, like, with him getting cheated out of the primary, and this, like, the Democrats putting up, like, the absolute probably worst presidential candidate in history because it was her turn. I think you saw so many people come right, to the right side of the aisle. The same story that you told me is like, I saw all this stuff going on, I saw this happening. I think what happened with Bernie specifically is what pushed so many people over the edge. Like, I have a good friend named Derek Jones in upstate New York. Shout out to Derek Jones, he's probably watching this. He had the same thing. He's a huge Bernie guy. He's from Cincinnati, Ohio, so we connected real well up there. But he's just, I was this huge Bernie guy. Then like the whole primary thing happened because he's like, I just got into politics. It sounded great. I loved the appeal of it. Then he's like, oh man, like I got cheated. Like what's this? And he's like, what else they lying about? What else they cheating us on? You know what I mean? And they start looking in the more. He's like, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't work. And I mean, I was meeting him like right after. He's like, hey man, I'm like a moderate, like you're a political guy, like talk to me, what's going on? And we used to talk all the time about it. And he's fairly politically active. He keeps up, but he's about as right wing as it gets now. He's on like par with us. So then the March for Our Lives thing. So I was talking to this girl the other day. I can't remember where it was at. Might have been one of the protesters at the Charlie Kirk event at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania one. She was telling me that, guns kill children, blah, blah, blah. Like, we need to ban, I think she said, all semi-automatic weapons. And, like, to her, like, knowledge, she knew what all semi-automatic weapons were. She was talking handguns that were everything that, like, basically was
You pull the trigger once, you get one bullet.
To her credit, she knew. But I was like, so the statistics show, 30,000 gun deaths a year, like 60-something% are suicides. So you're down to 10,000, like 500 to like 1,000. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I think it's 900 are rightful means of self-defense and accidental discharge. So you're down to like 9,000. Then like 75% of those are gang-related activity, with the vast majority of those being with an illegal weapon. So you're down to like maybe 2,000 to 3,000 like actual gun violent deaths per year, and then even less than 1% of those are mass shootings. It's such a non-issue. And I was saying, there's not a gun problem. Gun violence has actually decreased since the 70s and 80s, but studies show that the more gun control you have, the more likely there's going to be gun violence and gun deaths. I said, even though it makes you feel good to advocate for gun control, because we know that's why you're doing it, even though it makes you feel good, the numbers don't back you up. So how could you justify that in your mind to support something that you know is going to exemplify the problem that you're trying to fix? That doesn't make sense to me. That's lunacy. If I was like, that's like smoking cigarettes to cure cancer. Like you're like, oh, I know this cigarette is going to like make this cancer worse. I have lung cancer. I shouldn't smoke cigarettes. But in my mind, I think I want it to work. Then there's I just don't understand it. And I was like, I don't see your logic. I don't see like how you could think something that you just know doesn't work. And it just got nowhere. She didn't want to hear it. She started going off on some tangent and was like, you don't even want to talk about it. You just want to believe what you want to believe.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of the people I dealt with. Now, there are definitely socialists that I've met over time that I wouldn't know that I didn't know back when I was a socialist, who are actually pretty cool to have an open discussion with. But far too many are just, they want to feel good without actually doing anything. By nature, many people tend to go, they want to do the bare minimum for the maximum reward. And that's what this modern day slacktivism is. They're going out to a march, you go out for like 2 hours or so, you grab a cup of Starbucks. 'Cause let's face it, every time you go to one of these marches, the trash cans are filled with Starbucks cups. And anyone that had to March for Our Lives, I stopped by a trash can at their meeting spot. The entire thing was just Starbucks cups. Or there's a family-owned shop across the street from where it started. They sold those cups too. And they go there, they can go virtue signal with their friends, like, oh, I'm here today because I'm so concerned about the children. They always try to find an emotional ploy. But they go, they march for 2 hours or so, they give some emotionally charged speeches, and they go home on a Facebook where they get their ego stroked because, oh, I did all these wonderful things. Aren't I a good person? That's what happens, and that's what scares me, what's going on. So back to how I switched over. So after I left, I abandoned the left. So I abandoned the left. I kind of gotten at that state of anomie where you just don't really know what's going on. You don't have any. Your identity's kind of all over the place. You don't know where you're at. It's like, I can't do this, but I'm not sure about this. And I started reading more Noam Chomsky. So I read like one or two of his books, looked at anarcho-syndicalism for like a month or so, and it just didn't sit. Kept talking to my friends I met during a school year, Adam, Justin, and them. And Brandon and I agreed on almost nothing at this point. Like, we just could not say anything. And slowly, I was realizing we were having all these differences. I was more with Justin and Adam, who were more libertarian or conservative. And that built over time. And finally, I got introduced to Milo Yiannopoulos. This was back when he was like just taking off, and it was a big thing. That's one of the things we did together is we'd all go to one of our houses whenever he'd have a speech, whenever he'd like doing a speech at university.
And you'd watch it.
Yeah, we'd all watch together and all that. So we'd all get together, like usually at my house, because I had a good basement for that. And we'd just sit there, we'd stream it on my Xbox, and we'd watch it. But he's one that kind of helped me pull over because what happened is I slowly started finding, I was like, okay, so I'm finally listening to more conservative speakers. I'm actually liking some of the things he says. I don't agree with everything, but there's also the edge too. Like I'm still like, of course, I was like just 19 when I got introduced to Milo, so I still had that edgy teenage phase going on to some extent.
Yeah, well, I feel like Milo, man, he's just such an interesting guy now because that whole pedophilia thing. Well, he's not a pedophile, but by any means,
he hasn't bounced back from it, and he probably won't.
Yeah, no, he's not a pedophile, but basically he said, like, in the gay community that,
mm-hmm.
you know, sometimes these, like, adult kid, he was, like, 14 or 15, he had relationships like a 20-something-year-old, and he said it was a positive experience for him. That was when he got all that negative feedback, but...
Yeah, he never bounced back from that.
He's been off a cliff ever since. No one even wants him on. He's been pretty much blacklisted from any conservative thing.
Yeah, and here he... was when it was when he was just taking off. He was extraordinarily popular with everybody. And what's happened is, with this, I got exposed to more ideas. I got exposed to more ideas to a different speaker. And of course, he was edged. Like he wasn't like what I expected. Like all like a normal conservative, like a normal Republican. I pictured him in the scheme almost. Like suit and tie, very elitist. He didn't come off as that. He came off as very laid back. Someone more relatable. I come from a working class family, so he was more relatable in that sense that he wasn't so stiff, he wasn't stuck up or like that. He wasn't trying to be better than you. He was just out to go and laugh and also trying to make a point. And that kind of brought me over, and the night it officialized that I had gone over and become more of that libertarian. I've gone over more on that bottom right side of the political compass was the RNC. I went to the Republican National Convention 2016 in Cleveland.
Did you go just to go? Did you have was this like your first major political thing that you went to?
First major event on this scale. And I got invited to I was able to get into the Milo event. And when I went there, I met tons of different higher ups and like that. I talked to a lot of my friends. We got to meet a lot of people. And that's the night when I realized I think I found where I more lie. And I think and looking back now, and where I've regressed over time, I can get more into how I went from going to the right to where I am now. I can do that later in the class, but what happened is, looking back, I still had conflicts beforehand. Once I started talking to people who were socialists and all that, and communists, I had conflicts, but I just kind of buried it. There was personal conflicts where it was why are you doing this to this? But I just kind of ignored it. Yeah, I started questioning, but it was more personal, best way to put it is more personal, some certain personal values have conflicts in that. Work ethics, for example. You know me, I do tons of stuff. I'm all over the place.
You're never stopping. You're like the Energizer Bunny. You just keep on going.
I'm all over the place, all the stuff that I'm doing. And I knew too many that just sit around smoking blunts. I knew too many who would complain about capitalism, who complained about all these things going on, how they want to help the poor, never did a damn day of charity work, never worked hard in their lives, had just about everything handed to them. I mean, heck, I know one girl, I'm not going to say her name for the sake of privacy, but she was, her dad was an engineer and owned tons of property. I mean, she was a radical Bernie crat too, and she would go on and say, oh, I'm daddy's favorite, blah, 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 I get everything I want. And then, 10 minutes later, she can go on a tangent about how government doesn't do enough for the poor, and yada, yada, and the rich just want the poor to die.
See, I kind of saw some... All right, so I just got back. I did a police ride-along yesterday in Columbus, Ohio. And it's always good to do those things. I highly recommend it to anyone that hasn't. It's very eye-opening. I was military police for 3 years, and I know people on the force, and I was like, hey, let me come in, and I got hooked up with a great officer. He was a fantastic guy. I hope he's listening to this. It was a wonderful time. But we actually got in a pursuit, and we're going we actually didn't get up to speed. It was a very quick pursuit. So what happened was there was an intersection we were sitting at, and the street crossed, we were going to cross. A car blew the light at that street, and he's like, all right, let's, he flipped his lights and got behind him, and the car took off, just dropped. You could see the car drop when it, they accelerate. Well, it's a 21-year-old girl and her 15-year-old sister, and she hit 3 cars, then put her front end of the car into a funeral home, right through the front doors, perfect. You couldn't even aim it any better. Literally just went through the front doors. And so obviously she gets put in the back of the car, cuffed, And she's talking to us, and she's like, well, she didn't have a license to begin with, but she's
it wasn't like suspended. I just never got it.
She's never had it. And she goes, oh, my dad will buy it. She was borrowed the car. It wasn't her car. It was her sister's car. She's like, my dad will buy a car. My dad will buy her, or it was her friend's car. Her sister was in the car. She's like, my dad will give her one of our other ones. My boyfriend will pay these fines, or like he'll pay my bail. And there was just no sense of like, I'll handle my own issue. Like it was always
no sense of consequence.
Yeah, no sense. Someone else will take care of the problem. And like I think that, you know, these cities, they have like these democratic mindsets. They all vote Democrat, like these major cities. But that's the type of mentality you see in these cities. Every single person we stopped on that police route line, it was either someone else's fault or someone else was going to take care of it. And I guarantee you every single one of those people would vote Democrat if they voted. And they probably didn't because they were too lazy to go to the polls. Because if these people would have voted...
too busy watching Price is Right.
Not even that. It was a 21-year girl. Like, she had nothing. She didn't work. She did hair on the side. And she said she was going to school. I didn't like particularly believe her. She was kind of lying about some other stuff, but
hey, she might have been. I mean, you know how easy it is to get student loans. She could have been doing like gender studies or something like that.
Yeah, it was absurd. I couldn't even. Even after she got the whole thing was said and done. I even talked to the cop. I was like, that's insane. I was like, she had no sense of like, I'm gonna handle this. It was, oh, I'm not worried because someone else is gonna handle it. And I was like, truly disgusted by it. It was the worst thing I saw all day. And there was like a ton of stuff. It was just her attitude on how she is not accountable for her own actions. And I think that's what we're talking about on the left. You see that because when they start saying, oh, you know, they need this program for this, they need this program for that, it starts creating that mentality. And the general population amongst millions of people is like, well, if I quit my job, I get unemployment for this long. And I mean, unemployment's like, it serves its benefits. You know, I'm not saying we should get rid of all welfare programs or all like programs to help people, but it creates this like safety net that people don't mind hitting or even to staying at. They're like, yeah, I'll live in the safety net. You know, I'm comfortable. I'll live in this section.
It becomes a hammock.
Yeah, it becomes a hammock. They're sitting there chilling in it. And they're like, oh, yeah, the government's paying for my phone. They're paying for my heat. I got my door open. It's 30 degrees out. You know, I got my... the cop asked her, he's like, so how you paying for your kid's dinner? She's like, I got food stamps. I was like, yeah, be kidding me. Like, what do you have that's not handed to you by either your family or your government? And I think that's what I'm seeing. I think what you're talking about, it's so prevalent on a mass scale, especially on the left. You don't see it because... The right values hard work. They really do. But on the left, it incentivizes it. They believe in it. And then the people who are non-political, like who I was experienced or who I was with yesterday, they become that way too because it just sounds good. They don't care about politics. But you know, inner city folk, they don't care about politics. They want their handout. It's the mass education on it is this astounding. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. But yeah, I definitely agree with you there. But she was very much the very spoiled upper class, and here it's like I always describe myself to an extent as like more borderline white trash because like, my father came. It's kind of joke because he was like my father.
You know,
was
white
like
trash.
Yeah. Well, I was doing that because my father was the youngest of 8 to an iron worker. I mean, dirt poor. Like, pretty much, my dad used to say when he was growing up, all he has was a rock and a stick, and his dad used to beat him with a stick. And my mother was solidly middle class, very well mannered. Like what's the term for well bred? I guess like very like solidly middle class, like that lived an American dream. Family had a large house, very stable family. And here, my dad's family was just like his older sisters. When they babysit him, they basically put him in girls' clothes and then throw him out in front yard in front of his friends. Embarrassing. Like, he was the youngest of 8, so
yeah, he had to deal with all that.
But he was a grease monkey from he was a kid. He used to go and like find like broken like little like dirt bikes, things like that. He'd fix them up for fun, and eventually he got into like a career tech program in his high school, did automotive mechanics and all that. Yada yada, yeah. But he's very like that. Like you've met him. Like he's
he's a really good guy. You get along with him.
He's like and he's like every other guy working. Like he's like every other blue collar guy, but. The point is, I was very different from her background. She came from a very wealthy family. Dad had lots of money. They had lots of properties. They run in Akron. I forget how many she said. But
this was that girl, right?
Yeah, okay. This girl, a very rich one. This Bernie crap, like obsessed with Bernie. So, very different. I even brought it up at one time. I was like, notice how different we are. I'm more of that working class. I have different values than you do. You came from a very posh background.
Yeah, those values were instilled. I know your dad.
Yeah.
He's gonna promote hard working. He's gonna want to instill that into you.
She was very late. She's like very laid back, just kind of like coasting through. And here it's like I'm frantically doing as many things I possibly can, especially reading. But those are the kind of things I've seen over time where it's that entitlement, and that's what's really pushed me to the right. Was in the end, that was probably one of the biggest ones, was the entitled attitude. It was the fact that they never actually did what they said they would do. They seem to be wanting to force others to do it so they can feel good about themselves. That's why they go for government, because a lot of these people. Well, think about it. I brought this to one guy. He said he wants to help the poor. He said the government should go and provide food for everybody. It should be a human right to have food. And I asked, and he said that's the way you can help the poor. I asked him, why don't you go and start a soup kitchen? Why don't you go collect donations? Why don't you try to go and find a way where you can start a charity and actually help somebody? Or at least, for God's sakes, volunteer for an hour a week and actually live by what you say. Do you care so much about the poor? Why don't you actually go out there and try to do something about it? Instead of just going and crying like someone else should fix my problem so I can feel good about it. So it's almost like the South Park. You ever watch South Park?
I don't watch South Park too much.
There's an episode they made fun of like the... I have the social justice warrior mindset where you have there's a problem in society. I have to feel good about fixing it. And they had like this massive charity dinner where they spent like $500,000 to raise like $50 like that for this really weird charity. And it's kind of making fun of like how it's all feel good for the left. All they want to do is make themselves feel good. They don't want to actually do anything.
Well, have you? I know you're familiar with. I'm gonna butcher his name.
Dinesh D'Souza.
Yeah, Dinesh D'Souza. He's a great guy if anyone ever wants to hear. He has a fantastic, so he gets real into like how the parties flipped or how they didn't flip, I should say. And he gets like real deep into the Southern strategy. He's a super intelligent guy. He was a president at a college campus, and amongst other things. Real great listen. I saw him live once, and it was probably one of my favorite speakers.
Same here. He's definitely up there like Ben Shapiro.
But he does this thing where people will challenge him, like, well, why don't you like this welfare? He's like, well, what do you do? He's like, you want everyone else to bow down to your demands for what they're supposed to allocate. So I'm going to tell you what you should donate. But he points out the hypocrisy by saying, look, you don't donate anything yourself. He's so, like, a college student will say, well, you can't tell me there's not institutionalized racism in this campus because there's, like, this accepted rate versus this. He's like, okay, well, hypothetically, we'll go with it. He's like, you're wrong, but hypothetically, we'll go with it. So why don't you give up your spot in the college campus for a minority? And they never have a reason. They never.
They're always the exception.
Yeah,
that's how they are. They're the exceptional person, and that goes in more of the philosophy development over time. Like my view of the world is, most people seem to narrate their own lives as though they're the protagonist. They're that one special person. Everybody else is the background character.
That's a good way of looking at it.
You are the main protagonist in the story. You're like going out and about. Instead of like fighting the dragon, you're fighting the evil corporations and all that. People tend to go and turn themselves into a story almost. They have to go and make their lives interesting. Let's face it, most people, all they do is they wake up, they look on Facebook for like a half hour or so on their phones. They'll usually stare at their phones while driving to work as well, or school, whatever. Go through that day, do that 9 to 5, come home, watch TV for an hour or two, go to bed, repeat the whole thing. They don't really have anything interesting going on. Most people don't care to really go and have anything interesting going on. Most people, because it takes a lot of effort to have anything interesting going on. And people like to narrate their lives with their protagonist, everybody else is the background character. And that's what one of the issues is with the left, is it is all about me. Ironically, by saying they're all collectivists, they all think that's a collective around them.
Yeah.
They think that, it's going to be all my ideas. It's going to be if my socialism is the right socialism. Nobody else's socialism is right. And that is the issue that we have, is it's almost an extreme, it's a weird form of narcissism almost. And that I can't be wrong about anything for a lot of these kids. And once they realize how much government sucks at getting anything done, like how much money they lose in taxes, how crappy a lot of the laws are, how horrible these government bureaucracies are to deal with, they'll come over. I mean, that's probably what happened to me to some extent. Is also working. And I got my first job at while I was in high school. Like my first paycheck, they took a good chunk out of it. And I was like,
"Where's my money at?"
It's like, you bastards! You took it all.
Yeah. So like, there's a saying. I can't remember who said it. I was told recently, and I forgot. It was I think it was Ronald Reagan. Might have been Ronald Reagan. If you don't quote me on it, but it's like if you're not a Democrat in your 20s, you don't have a heart. But if you're not a Democrat,
I think that was Churchill.
It was Churchill. You're right, actually. I never knew that. I used to quote that all the time, and I finally heard who it was by. And it was Winston Churchill. So you go to the RNC, and does that motivate you? Like, I want to get back on campus and do my own thing.
So what happened is, after the RNC, kept reading and just trying to take in all the material possibly could. Found I'm definitely. I said, yeah, I'm definitely Republican. We need. It's like it's kind of it's like a very slow shift, and then it's like once I looked at the Democratic Party, it was like it was kind of that enemy. But I was like, I knew I didn't like government influence because I realized that government influence is nothing. Governments do nothing more than try to gain more power for themselves. That's why that's still anarchism. But then I went more towards Republican Party. I was like, okay, they're the small party government. I'm gonna go ahead and try to work with them. So I got more involved. I actually ended up. So it's like 2 months after switching me and identifying as Republican and conservative and all that. I ended up going and becoming treasurer for my college Republicans chapter, and then working hard trying to get everybody involved, trying to keep the chapter running. And that went on and that kept going on. I'm still the treasurer. I got reelected, and really it was with that is when I started really go and get involved. So it was like after the RNC, it was like immediately just took off, and it's amazing for me. It's like how it wasn't like a very solid change where I was like, okay, a little more capital. It was like chipping away.
It was
chipping away.
What was the switch?
Yeah, it's kind of chipping away. It's like imagine like a mountain, like an avalanche almost. You chip away a little more. Eventually, you just don't have any support, and then the snow just all falls. And that's really what happened with the switch. But after the switch, though, I was still trying to find exactly where on that conservative libertarian spectrum I lie.
So you get into your college Republicans, and you're the treasurer. You still are. Well, for another couple of weeks till you graduate.
Yeah, I'm getting out of here soon, baby. Done.
Then, so you're like, what? So you're also the chapter president for Turning Point. What really interested you in Turning Point? Like, how did you discover it, and then how did you start it? Like, walk me through that.
Well, I remember it was a brutally cold. I remember it being a brutally cold day in January 2017. Yeah, it was about a year. Yeah, a little more than a year ago. And here I ran into the field director at the time for the area, Timon, and he introduced me to Turning Point USA. I was involved in college Republicans, but I was always looking for something else to do because there wasn't a whole lot to do with that chapter.
Not
there was
enough
restrictions.
activism.
Yeah, it wasn't like I didn't have enough. I couldn't play enough role. I was managing the finances and things like that, and he introduced me to it. I was very enthusiastic, so I got his contact info and all that. And later on, he offered me a position as vice president for the new chapter. I was like, I want you to help me find a chapter at Akron. I think you'd be great. So I get along with two other guys. Both were named Mike, which just got confusing over time. And what ended up happening is, so the one Mike that was president, very quiet, reserved guy. He was, I think, mechanical engineering. Mm-hmm. I met him like once because he was appointed by Timon. So I do just about all the paperwork. All that the other mics did, and it really doing for the most part was just signing, and then helped me get and then the one mic helped me get signatures and but I wrote the entire Constitution in like 4 days off our template. I did all the paperwork, went through all the meetings for it, got everything together, got I got people to help me with sign-ups, and eventually I was able to found the chapter. And what happened is, because of my hard work, the other Mike that was the president, he wasn't really contributing too much. And I asked him because there's a lot of work involved being president. And I learned that just being vice president. I asked him, Mike, you aren't getting horribly involved with this. Like, you seem like you always have something going on engineering. And he said, that is true. I didn't think it was going to be as much as it was. And I said, do you want me to go and be the president, and you can be the vice president, and you can be like the treasurer if you want? Because you're good with numbers. We need somebody that's good with numbers. I can show you what you can do, but that's probably a role you'd like, because it's not as much. And he wanted to do that. He said, I actually prefer treasurer over president. So we switched. I became the president when we officially founded the club. So when we officially submitted all the paperwork in, I was the president, and then the mics are vice president and treasurer. So fast forward to the founder of the chapter. So the one mic I never kept in touch with him over the summer. And I find out later on, it's like, he didn't even like tell anybody. He just transferred to another university, like out of nowhere. So I was out with the treasurer, and the other Mike, who was a vice president, had to he resigned because he had a bunch of stuff going on as well, like college Republicans and things like that. But overall, founding the Turning Point chapter at Akron, it was not as bad as like other campuses. It wasn't like extraordinary. I didn't have any pushback from the administration, surprisingly.
It wasn't like Kent State or Berkeley by any means.
Yeah, it wasn't where there was like tons of pushback. They didn't even really question me. It was more like just make sure you get all the right paperwork in. They helped me out with that, and I got the chapter established in time for the fall. So going to fall semester, and it's like sitting there, and I'm going out probably 3 times a week or so, tabling, trying to get more people out. And actually, at a point where if you remember this, we were larger than all of the other political groups on campus after one semester.
Right.
And then early this spring we were larger.
Well, I mean, we still are. It's just this semester's been horrible with weather. You can't even go outside. People just don't want to do anything.
Yeah, the weather's awful. Not only that, but we have finals coming up, and most of the Turning Point members in our chapter are engineering majors. I always joke with the executives and some other friends that we're a political group that's all engineers. Like me, Zach, and then like one other guy, the token political science majors in the political group, and then our secretary is the sole like education major, and everybody else is like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, aerospace engineering, chemical engineering. So it's all like some form of engineering, and then you have like 4 people who aren't engineering in the entire chapter.
I think a lot of that's just based off of how analytical they are.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about that quite a few times. Is like we need to if conservative groups on campus want to get their numbers up, target the engineer guys. We have a good engineering department on our campus. They're numbers guys. That's all they care about. It's numbers. They're robots. Like they're all they see is ones and zeros. So they don't care about the political like side of things, because what's that do for them? It's nothing. They don't have not political. They don't have an emotional appeal in their area of study. So that's like a foreign thing to them. All they care about. You get into like the arts and sciences and all that. Everything's emotional based.
Dude, God, you're making them sound like they're cold-hearted sociopaths.
They are, in a good way. No, because they just like emotion to argument, emotion to reason to engineers. I think is a foreign thing, because look at all our engineering guys. They don't care about if someone cries over a political issue, because like that's not the numbers. They don't understand. And I'm with them on that. And I think we're more analytical based people. But I think when you get into like the political science and all that, you start seeing like, well, what about the feelings? What about think of the kids, think of like think of the minority of this and that. And I think that's where you see that massive difference. So we get Turning Point started. And this is when you and I first started meeting, because like that was what really that was that fall 2017 was.
Yeah.
Did you start fall 2017 or did you start?
The chapter officially started fall 2017. We had it. It was founded technically in May, but it was like the last week to start anything, so we couldn't have any meetings. So we just didn't do anything in May or in the summer. So our first meeting was in August.
Yeah, and I was there. That's when we met. That's when I got out of the Army.
Yeah.
And we started
hanging out more and more. We got a whole group to go in and all that. We all became friends. We got a whole group of friends going on.
Yeah, it's a good. Good. It's a really good environment, because everyone's just super friendly. I think Dave Rubin said it best. He was at our Chicago conference that unfortunately you didn't get to go to, but
had to work that weekend.
Yeah, it was a pretty good conference. Dave Rubin's like, hey, I'm not even a libertarian or conservative guy. I'm a classic liberal, which I think classic liberal is more right wing now than ever before.
Right.
He's like, we disagree on everything. He's pro-abortion. He's anti-death penalty. He's kind of a gray on taxes. But he's like, I can come here. You guys want me to speak. You guys want to hear what I have to say. And he's like, we disagree on a lot. Probably more than most. But you guys don't care. He's like, you guys just want to hear what I have to say. He's like, you don't get that on the left. He's like, you have these open ideas. And I think that's the beauty of our group, because we all disagree on everything. Like, you and I disagree on Syria and all that.
Yeah.
But we don't care. Like, that doesn't bother us. But, like, if you have 2 people on the left and they disagree on, like one social program versus
like
another.
What I had. I lost friends because they could not deal with the fact that I was on a different side.
We could completely disagree on politics to the day, like, as long as the day goes on, and we don't care. It's just, okay, like, let's go ride motorcycles, or what are we going to do?
Ride motorcycles, go fishing, or whatever.
Yeah, it's this how it is. I think so. You get Turning Point started, and then, we have the largest political group on campus by far. We have the most traction, and we do the most.
Mhm.
Whether it's tabling, events, we're trying to get a speaker in. And then, so we had AFP come in, or they helped with the grassroots leadership.
Yeah.
Is that how you got involved with AFP? Can you just explain to the people listening to what AFP is exactly?
So the best way I'm going to sum it up as short as I possibly can. So the group Americans for Prosperity, there's lots of different branches, but the core focus is economic reform in particular. So they support limited government, of course, but they are like the main issues right now that we have, like school choice, prevailing wage. We supported the tax reform. Like we did a lot of work, like trying to push that tax reform. So we focused on a lot of economic issues. So there's a lot of similarities to Turning Point, but they focus almost exclusively on the economic side of things. So that's why the school choice comes in. That's part of economics. They deal with taxation, school vouchers, yada yada yada.
Well, I think it's horrible. Yeah. So when we're in Chicago, and I was, you look at the neighborhood where Obama's in versus like the neighborhood like 5 minutes away. Two different schools per neighborhood, basically. Completely different schools, and they're 5 minutes away. And I think that's where school choice. So why should the kids 5 minutes down the road have to suffer from like worse? Like they had to share like one textbook per 3 students, I think it was.
Not only that, but the amount of waste that be cut down, because you have so Cleveland City Schools. I don't know if you know this. The Cleveland Public Schools, just north of us, spend $17,000 per student, and almost all of them are failing. My school district spent about just over $9,000 per student, and it's rated excellent.
What do you think? What do you think the contributing factor to that is? What do you think? Where do you think that money's going? Do you think it's just waste, or do you think they legitimately?
I think
have
I think a lot of it is going to be waste. It's going to be a lot of extra administration. Administrators can think of it. It's a big city, so they'd have a larger pool of money. Well, when you have a larger pool of money, you don't, and especially when you're spending someone else's money. Let's face it, it's what government does.
Yeah.
It spends someone else's money. There's not, and on top of that, they don't have much competition. They don't have doesn't need to be efficient. So they can give extraordinarily large pensions, or they can go and hire useless employees, or they can have officials who make way too much, like superintendents and the like.
Well, I think that, how I kind of like look at that is a good analogy is, okay, let's say I became just a multimillionaire, and it's like, hey, Doug, we're good friends, I want you to have a Ferrari. You're not going to take care of that Ferrari. I mean, you would, but hypothetically, you wouldn't take care of that Ferrari as if you earned it on your own. Like you saved up your money and bought your own Ferrari. You're going to value that as a higher thing. Well, that's how I view the government spending money. Like it's not mine. Like,
there's no value to
earn that. It's someone else's. Why they're just going to go willy nilly with it.
Every big government program that there is, typically it starts out well, but that's because you don't have the gunk built up in it, and on top of that, you don't have to worry about finance, because it's like, oh, we don't have any debt for this organization. So Social Security's going to work out so well, and it's going to help everybody. And then fast forward today, we're $21 trillion in debt. Our departments keep getting bigger and bigger. There's tons of waste. Like, for example, you had within the military, like in the Pentagon, I think it's like, tens of millions of dollars is completely unaccounted for. Like, just
it was more than that. It was like $1 billion, wasn't it?
Billion?
Yeah, it was something wild. I remember
the first I heard it was like, I think it was between 10 million and 100 million.
Well, it was
$1 billion.
I can't remember. It was something. Oh, there's also all those like where you can't see where the money's going, so who knows what the actual number is. But I remember it was when Hillary was the Secretary of Defense, right?
Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, yeah. You're right. It was under her when she was in that position. They lost a ton of money in her position, and they're like, she was saying, how could Trump lose, like however much money in business, but she's just losing it to like off the books. Like it's his was just expenditures and business risk. Hers was just like, where'd the money go? So to
kill all of her opponents.
Yeah, basically. I swear, like, what was that one guy? I'm not trying to become Alex Jones by any means, but they ruled it a suicide by him shooting himself in the back of the head twice. Like
I can't remember that guy, but I do remember the one guy, Seth Rich. They said it was a robbery, like nothing was taken. And it was under very suspicious circumstances.
Was he shot or was that the bathtub?
No, he was shot. Another guy died in a bathtub.
Was he zipped himself up in a bag?
That was a different guy. I think it was Hillary Clinton. Or someone related to her.
There's a lot of... Yeah, I'm not trying to be that guy where I'm like... But there's something suspicious. With Kennedy Jr., was it Robert Kennedy Jr.? Died in that plane crash when he was announced the front runner for governor of New York. Or
Yeah,
he was
it's-
governor of New York when.
I can't remember. I don't know too much about the Kennedys.
But no,
Other
but
than like JFK
when she-
just being mayor.
well, he was ahead of her in a race for an elected an elected position. And the day it was announced that he was a Democrat, as all the Kennedys are, and it was announced that he was the front runner above Hillary. This is early '90s, and his plane crashed the next day, and then Hillary won that year. But there's I think there just needs to be more looked into. I'm not saying anything is going on, but there's.
You're not Alex Jones.
Yeah,
you,
no,
you haven't been taking your super male vitality powder.
I'm
I know
just-
that. You got a canister still upstairs that's full.
Yeah.
You haven't been taking it.
I just think that there's just enough reasonable doubt. Like, hey, something might be going on.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to get Alex Jones that Hillary's killing like children, and like, I'm not.
Yeah.
So
She's a reptilian. Just gotta pull the mask off.
yeah, so you go to see.
Sorry, folks. I had a steak today and swam 2 miles, ran 15,
Yeah.
lifted a truck over my head.
Yeah, Alex Jones is probably the most fit person I've ever seen. So you're going to AFP and you're doing Midwest. So what would your job consist of working for AFP?
So Americans for Prosperity, I'll be a field director.
Okay.
And absolutely ecstatic about it because I did a lot. It's a lot, and the foundation is a lot like what I've done at Turning Point, recruiting people and all that. But I get people more in an activist role. I go out, I try to form relationships with different people, like different people who want to be politically active, who want to get involved within the political process, and just about every time you're gonna be friends with them. I mean, one of my closest friends, I know him through Americans for Prosperity. He's actually the one I met him a little more than a year ago. We become good friends. We hang out fairly often. We're going out next week for a beer to go celebrate me getting the job. But here, you go out, you meet people, you try to get them politically involved. So you get them to try to go out, knock on doors, get on phones, try to either get people to call their representatives, and or get them to come to chapter meetings where you talk about different issues going on in the state.
When you do that, do you have them try to push specific issues, or is it just the issues that matter to them? When you're like, I'm gonna get them more active, are you trying to say more active for AFP, or are you saying more active on their own beliefs?
It's gonna be typically in general like their own beliefs. Like we're not like when they come out, like we do foaming, for example. We've got several different things going on. So if somebody's more concerned, like say I have a parent who's more concerned about school choice, that's like their one issue. We'll help them with that. We want to show them like, hey, this is what you do.
Okay.
So we're trying to get them more active and like what they consider about. So like somebody, because a lot of people are single issue voters.
Well, yeah,
like you'll have
it's-
like a single mother who's in a poor side town. Kids are going to a terrible school. The school isn't doing anything better. They're wasting a lot of the money. The superintendent's making well into the 6 figures when all the schools are failing. She wants her kids to have a better future and have in schools. She wants school choice. I'm going to help her with that. Because that's my goal is I want people to get politically active.
So it's all age groups, or is it just
All age groups. So anybody that's a voter, even like high school kids, of course, can get involved, like, door knocking. They just can't vote, but...
Well, can you say like what AFP's issues are like one more time, just so in case anyone does like find like that they support those issues, that they can get in contact with AFP. Like
Definitely.
So what's like one more time?
So Americans Prosperity, there's a lot of stuff. The 3 ones we've been focusing like right now, particularly like within Ohio, has been like school choice. We did the tax reforms, and then we also been doing prevailing wage. But all around, there's lots of issues. There's like they want to fight corporate welfare, so they want to get rid of like government subsidies to different businesses. They want to end the corporatocracy where government plays favorites and choose which companies succeed and which ones fail. So that's a big one. It's in support of basically allowing of entrepreneurship. So it wants to go and deregulate the economy significantly. It's very pro-capitalism.
It trusts the invisible hand of the free market more than like
government can't fix every problem. Just look what
or
I mean, just
most
look
problem, or even
really anything.
Yeah.
Government really can't do anything except expand its own power and make the citizens think that good things are happening when they aren't. And that gets into where I am today. So, jumping topics, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So, I got more of the position I'm at politically from. It's funny. So, the university we go to, Akron, I haven't really had too many too many professors who are socialist words and like that, or too left leaning. For quite a while. I'm talking really this semester is when I really experienced it. But last spring I took a class with a professor. One of my favorites is still meet up with him once in a while for cigars. And he's like more of that old school traditional Catholic, but you can't tell that by his class. It's called Trump's Triumph. Fantastic class. One of the best classes I've ever Benin, I actually learned stuff in this one. It wasn't a joke like the other class I've taken.
Does the class just look at it from more of like an outside perspective on how it?
It's it's both sides. So he was someone where he was pro-Trump, but he didn't really tell you at all. He doesn't say in class like what his views are. All he said was, "I'm showing both sides." He gave a very objective view. I didn't know until halfway through the course I actually talked to him one-on-one that I learned what his values were, and we aligned a lot. But he assigns a lot of reading from both sides. He brings speakers from both sides. So he bring in this person, he bring in this Republican, he bring in a Democrat next week, and so on and so forth. He bring a lot of different people to go and talk about issues. Well, he had us read a book. It was written by Justin Raimondo. It's called Reclaiming the American Right. One of my all-time favorite books. I'm reading through it for a second time right now. And that book definitely had impact, like trying to find where I am politically, because it talks a little about the history of the American right. It talks about more of that old right, like John T. Flynn, like Garrett, and goes into like Ayn Rand a little bit. But like it's kind of like where Ayn Rand lies is kind of great because she was like hard libertarian.
You're right.
Yeah, but it goes into more of that. Talks like Pat Buchanan. And I found more where I like. Because it talks a lot about the paleoconservatives, more of the very old school, like the America First, non-interventionists. And there's things I agree with them on. There's other things I disagree with them on. So they tend to be very protectionist and they're very against immigration, which are two issues I definitely disagree with them on.
Well, you're huge into foreign policy to begin with. You're graduating with a political science major and you have a minor in Arabic. So, and you've told me that you've looked at like futures, like political futures in the foreign policy sector. So, like, what would you be like? I just want to do that. What would be your job like? That you'd be like, I want that. That's my end goal. What do you think your foreign policy career is?
I would love to either write foreign policy. I'm very non-interventionist. I'm more of the we can't solve the world's problems. We're going to Pax Americana does not work, and I'd like to actually write the foreign policy or become a diplomat or a liaison. Because I want to go either I'd prefer to go private sector, like a liaison, like between different oil companies, Middle East to the United States, things like that, help facilitate trade, or help heal Cuban cultural barriers. Because you don't have a lot of Americans understand different like Arab culture or even Islamic culture in general.
Well, yeah, you have a minor in Arabic, so you're definitely going to be focusing on the Middle East when it comes to that. Yeah. So, what really got you interested in the Middle East? I know you have friends from the Middle East, and you are really close with them. Would you say that's it, or like? Can you just give me like an overview on like your interest in the Middle East, how you got there real quick, and just what's going on with that, and like what you think you could bring to the table on that?
So I'm going to get into how I got into taking Arabic of all things. All of the languages people do take at school.
No one takes Arabic.
Yeah. So you're going to get a laugh at this one. So I was looking at like going full time for college. I'd look at different foreign language for political science, and this was the degree requirement for me. And here, my mother was telling me to do Spanish, and I jokingly said, "No, I think I might just do Arabic. I think I want to do something a little different." And she flips out, and she's like, "Oh, that's the hardest language. It's one of the hardest languages in the world. You're not going to be able to do it, blah, blah, blah." And I was, of course, being rebellious. I was like, "No, what? That's it. I'm doing Arabic." And she's like, "If you do Arabic and you fail, you're blah, blah, blah." It's going on. Well, here, I signed the Arabic class. She's fuming. She's like, "I hope you do well in that, Doug. But I'm going to warn you, it's going to be difficult." I do well, and I actually found that I like the language because it's so different. It's something that's completely different, and I found that I get along. And my professor that I had he's Egyptian, hysterical guy. I absolutely love him. He's one of my favorite professors. The guy is just like very jovial, but he's a fantastic professor too. I've learned language very quickly. I've learned a lot of the language very quickly through him, and I love being in his classes. But also the cultural aspect. There's a lot of different just the complete difference in culture is amazing. Like between a lot of Arab cultures and American cultures, but there's still a lot of American influence, and most of the Middle East. But
so, what are your views on like kind of like the degradation of Middle East society in the last since the Islamic Revolution? You know, I'm talking about how back in the day, the Middle East. You know, you get girls in like go-go pumps and mini skirts, and there was a burqa in sight. Now you can't...
You're talking about like Iran, the Islamic Revolution. So that's that. Yeah. So with Iran, I actually took a class on that, ran a ton into it. So what's happened is you have a lot of these countries. So Iran and Turkey, like only two really stable countries within that region that of significant size. So with Iran, Iran is completely different from Arab culture. So different language. The Arab countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, so on and so forth, they speak Arabic. Iran speaks Farsi. Farsi is influenced by Arabic, but completely different. Different vocabulary, different grammar, different pronunciations. There's shared stuff, but they're different language. They're completely different languages. Well, also the culture is different as well. But the history is what's important. So Turkey and Iran are the only two countries that have really ever had like a solid sovereign culture. So Turkey, of course, used to be the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
So they had a solid culture. It wasn't like they were like artificially drawn into borders and like that. So that's why they're much more stable. Also because it used to be the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
But you also have Iran. It has like some history of occupation, but no to the extent of like the Middle East and like that. They had their own culture. They had a national identity, national unity. Even under the Qajar dynasties. I mean, the Qajar government was very weak and very authoritarian. The Shah was the one that could dictate everything. He controlled everything. If he wanted it, he got it. So, what happened is you had that cultural unity still. You still had, with a lot of the reforms for modernization that came about within the 1920s with the Pahlavi dynasty, with Reza Khan becoming Reza Shah. Once he overthrew the Qajars, he started going and he made the official language for just about everything to be Farsi.
Mm-hmm. Which is which is not the same as the rest of the Middle East.
Yeah, it's not. And even then, within Iran, you have a lot of different ethnic groups and all that, and different languages, and you have different religions. So you have like small Christian populations, small Sunni populations.
Arabic's unique in the fact that it's just spoken so differently everywhere else. Not like it is in America, where you might say y'all in the South, but it's like the language is almost completely different in and of itself per region. And I know that's something you complain about all the time.
Yeah. So I have friends from different backgrounds. So my closest friends, I'm very close to her and her family. I'm their mom says I'm basically a son. I'm always helping out. I'm very close to them. They're Iraqi. So their mom was born in Iraq. And my friend's grandfather was a diplomat under Faisal II, I think it was, King Faisal II, in Iraq. But they had to flee Iraq, and they went to Abu Dhabi once the Ba'athist party came into power, because they're executing all the opponents and all that, especially when Saddam came in. So they had to flee. But their dialect of Arabic is completely different from all the others. So you have all these dialects. The Egyptian dialect is completely different from the Lebanese dialect. You almost can't understand each other between the two, because grammar can change to an extent. You'll have a change of pronunciation. So, for example, you have in Egypt, you have the letter Jim. It's in Egypt, it's more of a G. And I think it's in Shami, it's more of a J, I think it is. I'm learning Fusha, which is the standard. So I'm trying to remember how the dialects pronounce it. And so you have overall the difference is going to be like G, J, J. And it changes how hard you pronounce it. And so in Egypt, it's more like a G sound.
Yeah. So
it's all very confusing. And then they all argue. My friends are at Speak Arabic. They all argue saying their dialect is the right one. All the others like the backwater version.
So do you think when they switched to Farsi, that was like they started separating themselves from the rest of the Middle East?
Well, they always were, because they were never part of the Ottoman Empire. So the entire Middle East, pretty much the entire Middle East, you had Ottoman Empire stretched. They had part of the Balkans. Then you had all the way through. You had much of Iraq. You had much of not all of Iraq, really. You had all these massive swaths here, just about all of the Middle East, except like the Arabian Peninsula for the most part. They didn't have all of that. But you have about 600 years. The Ottoman Empire existed. 600 years, these cultures being kind of pushed down, and then the Ottoman Empire collapses after World War One. Yeah, the Sykes-Picot deal. All these artificial borders are drawn. And then the British and French leave really in the 30s. 30s and 40s are gone. And you have in Iraq, for example. Iraq is an artificially created country. Never existed before. You have three different groups that hate each other. You have the Sunnis, the Shia, and the Kurds up in the north. And these groups do not like each other. But what kept them from fighting? Sorry.
That's right. The reverb's real bad if you hit. You just got to really focus on.
What kept them from fighting each other? You had one powerful figure they all hated, Saddam. So you had a lot of dictatorships that pop up, because dictatorship can keep the lid on this because all those groups didn't find that dictator. Well, that's not exactly stable, as we all know. I mean, dictatorships collapse pretty often. So you have a lot of the instability. That's why you have the instability today, and also foreign interventions and and that played a role in Iran too. You had foreign interventions that came into play, which really led to the '79 revolution in my mind. So you've heard of Operation Ajax?
No, I haven't. So tell me about what's going on with that.
What happened is in Iran, you had 1953. You had Mohammad Mossadegh was the prime minister in the Majlis, which is the Iranian parliament. He became very popular with people because he wanted to go and nationalize all the oil refineries. Originally, at this point, it was owned by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which is modern-day BP. Mm-hmm. He wanted to nationalize it, so he started to move forward with it, and MI6 wanted to get rid of him, but they didn't have the power, and the British had been kind of expelled at this point.
So the British intelligence agency, mm-hmm. basically their CIA.
Yeah. Called RCIA, and I think it was Theodore Roosevelt. It was either Theodore Roosevelt or Franklin Roosevelt's grandson was actually the operative that ran the entire CIA operation for Operation Ajax.
So the whole point for that was for them to prevent the nationalization of the oil in that country
by overthrowing Mossadegh. They wanted to get rid of him. So in the end, they did. They restored Mohammad Reza Shah to the throne. They put him in there, and pretty much for about a little more than 20 years, things kept running. He's very oppressive. You had the Savak, which were the secret police. Horrible conditions. And ironically, the Americans, I think it was Eisenhower at that time, was the one who praised the Iranians for supporting their Shah again, when really it was all American influence. This is the first time we had overthrown a government. So he overthrew Mossadegh, got rid of him, brought the Shah back in because the Shah was friendly to us.
Right.
He only just wanted some royalties, and a few benefits, a few kickbacks, pretty much. And we supported the regime, and we supported this regime in Iran after we overthrew the one originally as elected. Basically, we installed our own practically dictatorship at this point. And with this, you had to get things getting worse. Yeah, lots of different wealth inequality. Not like just not like what the left talks about, where it's you have someone who makes $35,000 a year, and then you have somebody in a company who makes $1 million a year. No, we're talking absolute abysmal
pennies
poverty.
A day
yeah.
versus.
And then the Pahlavi dynasty, they were extraordinarily wealthy, and they even had their own charity of sorts, which they pretty much use to they'd go and use that to collect money and all that, and then they dish out that money to their friends.
Right.
If you were on their side, you got paid. If you weren't on their side, you got in trouble. You didn't get anything.
Well, that's a problem with hyper authoritarian regimes. Is people point to that stuff as that they act like that's the result of capitalism when it's really not. It's just
a result of an authoritarian system. And what happened is you had 79, pretty much. So what happened is the Islamic Republic was not actually very popular at the time. Was not really popular with the people because of course it was very secularized. That's what the Pahlavis really pushed for. So westernized the country. So you had girls in bikinis and mini skirts, things like that, and you had guys. Guys are still dressed 70s guys. Mm-hmm. Guys in the 70s.
It was very westernized.
Yeah, a lot of Western influence. The weapons were Western. They bought a lot of military equipment from the U.S.
We look at pictures from in that time, and the universities there were great. It was a modern hub. It was basically.
It looks like the United States.
Yeah,
almost,
it definitely does. There's grass everywhere. There was irrigation, and it was a prosperous time, at least
in the cities.
Yeah, in the cities,
especially in Tehran. In parts of Tehran, it was very nice. But then you had the Islamic Revolution, overthrew the government, and people didn't like that it became so religious. We wanted Sharia. The clerics, particularly Ayatollah Khomeini. He's one that came in, and he tried to come as a reformer, but he ended up being more the Sharia. So. This government probably would have gotten overthrown. Most likely would have collapsed from a lack of popularity and lack of legitimacy if it wasn't for Saddam. So the Iran-Iraq War plays a huge part in Iranian culture today because of the trauma from it. So you had this 8-year war. You had, I think it was something 700,000 casualties, almost an entire generation of. Imagine World War I in that area almost. The best way to describe it. Chemical weapons.
But not even spread amongst other countries.
No, it's just these two. And not only that, but the United States sold weapons to both sides. The Iran-Contra deal. Because you had Iran, when the Islamic Republic took over, the weapons were almost exclusively American. So they, of course, ammunition come from America, supplies, more guns. So you had the Iran-Contra deal, where both sides ended up using American weapons against each other. So we basically profited from both sides of the war. This was a severe trauma because in Iran you had a lot, like I said, almost an entire generation of young men were wiped out. Not today, it's more because of they were trying to rebuild the population. More than 70% of their population is under the age of 35. The Iranian population is extraordinarily young, but this trauma, this 8-year war, added legitimacy to the Islamic Republic and allowed it to stay in power because of this war. And this war ended up in
how did that add legitimacy?
Because Tehran was always on attack. You had bomber runs. You'd have a war going on. People would pretty much, if you questioned it, they accused you of being a traitor, being against Iran because.
Okay.
Yeah. So the war, because you have that terror of the war. When you're going through a war, usually patriotism's up, right?
Yeah.
So that's what they exploited, and it's pretty much they portrayed also as like a holy war in extent. So you have this going on, and this solidifies the Islamic Republic. That might would have collapsed if it wasn't for the war, but that war added legitimacy to it because of because I mean, 8-year war with how devastating it was. I mean, hell, they used children to clear minefields.
Man, it's disgusting.
It's absolutely awful. Like the things that happened in this war. This war was like one big crime against humanity. The United States sold weapons to both sides. That's the problem. That's probably big government.
Taking the United States out of this because I mean you can keep talking about it. I'm not upset. I know we've done bad things, but and I completely disagree with what us doing that. But just how anyone could support a side using, like child soldiers. But then you get the left today. They always try to like connect it with modern day politics or like. Oh, let's get Sharia law in here. Like, like this is like these people are like peaceful. You could be from the Middle East and be very peaceful. I have a lot of friends from the Middle East. I have a lot of friends who are Muslim. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of them. But these people from these areas are from war-torn areas. That's what a lot of these immigrants. That's what they know is war. That's what their parents knew.
It's the instability of it.
Yeah, and they're coming from that, and that's why you see like approval ratings for like terrorism is so high. Or like sympathy for a terrorist amongst like these populations.
It's all you know when you're raised in war. That's all you're gonna know.
Yeah, have you seen the Pew research results for like sympathy? Like I just mentioned them, but like for not the Middle East, like
in the UK.
In the UK, isn't that absurd? It's like 40% feel like it's justified like to commit terrorist acts in the name of Islam.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
So you get these. The Iraq-Iran war happens, and then what's the result from that? So it legitimizes the regime, like the regimes, and just what's going on from there.
So basically, what happens is basically it legitimizes the Islamic Republic, and from there it's able to try to build and all that. But at this point, even like it's had sanctions. It's been a very autarkic country for the most part. Well, like involuntary, like you don't have a massive amount of trade like the United States, for example. Lots of sanctions. So they try to build up. They have a lot of industry. There's a lot of potential within Iran. If the Islamic Republic ever collapse and like you have an actual like a stable liberal republic in, more like what you have in the United States or maybe in Europe.
Well, they've tried to install that.
Yeah, but that's the issue. Is historically hasn't worked. But right now, you have the Iranian population. A lot of them, Iran's having a lot of problems. So, a lot of them are unemployed. You have a lot of young Iranians are unemployed. You have a drug epidemic. I think it's something like 2 million Iranians. About 1 in 40 are addicted to something, like either opiates because they have a big border with Afghanistan, the largest opium producer in the world.
Huge,
or it's their version of meth, which is shishi. You have on top of that, a lot of them are very well educated. Engineers are a dime a dozen. It's hard to find any job whatsoever. It's not like here in the United States where you go for engineering, the minute you graduate, like 5 different recruiters are running up to you, begging you to come to them. They're all trying to go and outbid each other. A lot of them go for the same degrees, and you don't necessarily. It's still, of course, a good degree, but there aren't as many jobs there.
There's not also the variety of different career like you can have here. You can do, anything like you. They don't have a sculpting major in the Middle East, like that's,
well, I mean, they still have like arts and all that. I mean, it's like they still had like similar education. I mean, not gender studies, but or like anything like that lesbian dance theory, but they still had like sociology, they still had like graphic design, but there's lots of economic restrictions because 1, you have the puritanical religious law, and 2, government control. So government owns large portions of the economy, especially like the oil industry. So that's really plays into a lot of it. But no, like they have their own car manufacturer. But I mean, cars are produced in Iran, and a lot of them drive Iranian cars.
What's an Iranian car company? Do you know?
I don't remember the name of it, but no, like they have. But no, they
I would
have
love to see the safety star ratings on an Iranian. No, it's a solid 5 safety rating.
5 out of 100 stars.
Yeah,
It's a 5-star out of 100 though.
I couldn't imagine like every car you see cars from like Japan and all that, and like they all make it around.
Mm-hmm.
But you think if they were anything worth their salt, they would make it out of their own country. And I've never even heard of an Iranian car.
Well, I mean, it's because like pretty much anywhere in Iran, it's only
it's
in Iran. Yeah, it's like
I just would love to see one. Like, what would that be like?
look it up. I can't remember the name.
Yeah,
of it.
I'll look it up after this. But
Yeah.
like, I just can imagine.
But I remember because I never learned about it. It's like, but there's lots of different industries now, like textiles, things like that. So, the country has a lot of industries on its own, but the government scene is very corrupt. Not much gets done, and also when you have youth that are not only unemployed but highly educated, but can't do jack shit because the government says they can't do anything. That's gonna make for some pretty rowdy people. That's why we had what was it back in, I think it was October, November, when we had that uprising. You had those protests that broke out, turned violent. Yet the one woman got arrested because she took her hijab off.
Right.
Yeah, you have that. It's going to happen more and more in my mind. I predict it's going to happen more, unless the economy turns around.
Do you think the Middle East will ever stabilize to the point where, say, Iran could have like a legitimate, like
Iran
republic?
and Turkey? There's more potential there. It's unlikely to happen within next, I'd say, 50 years. I mean, Turkey, you have Erdogan, who's very authoritarian, slowly chipping away at everything. In Iran, you have very corrupt government. It's very religious, very oppressive. But the rest of the Middle East, almost no chance. In its current form, at least. There's going to be the borders are going to have to change or something. Like you already have the Kurds trying to form Kurdistan already, because they're kind of scattered all over. You have all these countries that are artificially created through the Sykes-Picot deal. You can't really have these countries aren't really necessarily going to be able to grow.
So,
and also it's just a cultural background.
So my so you're a non-interventionist, and I am for the most part too.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Syria thing, I know we disagreed with that on some points. I don't want us to go to war with Syria whatsoever. I thought it was the flex, but this is where I think about as interventionist as it gets, and I think I support it. Whereas I think that we need to sit down with major players in the UN, democracy, like based, like true democracy, so not like Russia, free market based, all that. And I think that the best way to fix the Middle East is to imperialize the parts of the Middle East that are the most unstable. And it's like a radical idea, and I don't think it would ever happen. But I think if what we did in West Germany, if we did that to countries in the Middle East and slowly pulled out over a span of 30 years, I think that would be, France gets a section, England gets a section, the United States gets a section, Canada gets a section. If you're a stabilized country to some extent, you can stay sovereign. You don't have to go by this. But if you're just like a true war zone, I think that would be the best way to stabilize it, where let the United States section worry about their own people in that area and setting up a government there, and then slowly pulling out over 30 years. It would, and half of me hates this because I hate spending money on foreign countries, but I think the investment in the long term, but also it would benefit. But I also think that we could utilize it so we can establish business there, and treat it like how we treat Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, and they could pay tax back to, back to the United States, and just treat it like a territory or a colony, basically, but not oppressive, but helps stabilize business, help stabilize economy, like denationalize things if that's prevalent in the country. I think that would truly be the way to go, but it would never happen.
Yeah, I do see a point, but there's still there's so many problems with that.
Well, it's a fantasy. Yeah. It's a pipe dream.
It's pretty much your fear. It's like, well, if things could go well, like everything worked properly, we could do that.
Well, do you have a better way of okay, so you just go to the most distraught Middle Eastern country. How do you fix it without doing that?
Can you really fix it? Can you really fix it from the outside?
I think you could. I think you could set up. I think you could truly set up, like you go in, this like we colonized all these other places, and they're relatively stable.
How are a lot of these countries that were colonized by the British and French working out?
Look at India. I'd say India is a pretty well success story.
India's doing well, but how is much of Africa doing? It depends on the circumstances.
I mean, other than recent like events like in the reverse apartheid, basically, South Africa was relatively. I mean, you got to like, it was a stable country, but I think the sudden withdrawal from a lot of these countries is what like it basically pulled the stilts out under like.
To an extent, it depends on nationality because what happens is in India. You didn't really have as much factional fighting as you do in a lot of different African countries. A lot of different African countries, there are lots of different factions because a lot of groups were put into artificial borders. Pretty much, India was not necessarily artificial. Was not really artificial in the sense that, like like Iraq was, or Syria was, or like Uganda is. India because of the British occupation. They all had to work together to get rid of the British. You had the Gandhi.
The British pulled out. They didn't get rid of them.
Yeah. Well, no. They eventually negotiated for their independence. So eventually they got rid of the British. I mean, the British withdrew voluntarily. That's because they lost all control. But what happened is you had Gandhi is a mixture of how Indian culture works, but also.
But they were imperialized for so long, and granted they had great resources.
But they still had a national unity. There was no infight. You didn't have infighting.
So then, when you establish these, like let's call them colonies or territories, try to like make that a priority to establish a national unity.
Only you can do that is by getting them to fight you. I mean, there's no way you can't. You can't artificially. It's hard to. You really can't artificially.
Well, no one's tried it. No one's really tried it, but you can. Yeah. I mean, there's been plenty of countries that have just really had like almost propaganda campaigns, like to ramp up national like support,
like South Vietnam, like Iraq, I mean, like Syria.
No, I mean you're right, but there is, you can try, you can really incentivize or not incentivize, you can really promote national identity. I think, I mean it's a pipe dream. It really is. It'll never happen, and I don't ever expect it to. But I think that's like the most legitimate way to ever like try to stay because.
But that involves foreign influence, and the problem is when you have. So, for example, like West Germany, we could definitely do because there's lots of cultural similarities. The United States has made up a lot of crowds, so we had understanding.
Puerto Rico. Look at Puerto Rico. Do you think Puerto Rico would be well off without us?
Are they well off right now?
I think they're compared to most South American countries. They're pretty dang well off.
Severe bankruptcy because of corrupt government policies. A lot of electricity. Most islands have electricity.
We both know. Well, look at Venezuela. Yeah. Look at Brazil. Look at Brazil and Puerto Rico. No, they're not super well off by any means. But comparatively to like their brother sister,
they actually have food.
And I think. But if we pulled out over the next 30 years, okay, so let's say Puerto Rico voted for their independence, and we're like, okay, we respect that. We'll listen because I hope that's what we would do. And we're like, but we're gonna do it over 2 decades, 20 years. Okay, fair, Puerto Rico? And they're like, fair. And then we help stabilize them for 20 years, set them up a little bit better, and then, like, they know how our system runs and how to operate it and all that because they have their government, they're part of our government, they're in our military, what have you. And then set them up. They would be one of the most prosperous South American countries out there. They easily would.
With the level of debt they have and the infrastructure problems, I don't think.
No, that's why we wait 20 years. You got to address that, but politically, economically, they're going to have a better chance than any other South American country.
Maybe, but I still I still personally err toward the side of they wouldn't necessarily because they have massive amounts of debt.
Well, they wouldn't be Dubai or the United States or what have you. They wouldn't be in some massively wealthy country but they would be by far more self-sufficient, and they would have a great layout ahead of them. And I think that's because we were there for so long. I think that I'm trying to say we should Puerto Rico countries in the middle
but I still say even in like Puerto Rico, it's like still. Culture can still somewhat be similar to ours. Different language to an extent because a lot of Puerto Ricans still speak Spanish at home. Yet,
but it's so far.
In the Middle East, it's like the culture there's such a cultural disconnect that it'd be impossible. You'd be seen as occupiers, and that's the only way you can really get.
Doug, that's why we have you. Doug, that's why we have you, so you can go speak Arabic to them.
Yeah. So yeah, I could speak it, but it's like
you could be the great
how we get-
communicator, Doug.
it's like yeah, I could go and tell them in Arabic that we're occupying them, but it's for their own good.
There's
Yeah.
the language barriers gone.
Yeah, you're
right
starting
there.
to sound like the British now, going to India. Oh, we're here to civilize you all. We're gonna fix everything.
We
20
got-
years later, okay, we're so sorry.
How's their civilization?
This is not gonna be like Vietnam. This is not gonna be like Somalia. This is not gonna be like Iraq. I promise. This is gonna work this time. All right, it's gonna work.
Yeah, because we got you, Doug. We didn't have you in those other countries. All right, Doug. I think we've been going pretty long. I think it's about time to call it a night.
All right,
Keep
perfect.
going. All right.
Thanks again for having me on.
No problem, man. Anytime. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This video will be up, and we'll get some more coming at you soon. Stay tuned. Like, share, comment, please. Just trying to get some more traction, and catch you next time. I wanted to murder you for hitting that table. No,
I'm sorry, I didn't flail my arms around.
I just kept.